Hello everyone, I'm Elena from Scientist Rebellion. I'm an astrophysicist who is now working only in activism. And I wanted to tell you about my experience with civil disobedience. I've tried to collect the experience of more people, but disclaimer, this is based by my experience. I'm a white female from Spain, and I have mostly done civil disobedience in Spain. And we will do about 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, depending on the number of questions some people have. So some things will be interactive, but mostly the questions would come at the end. So who is SR? I will briefly say about our group, about our movement. Scientist Rebellion is a broad range of scientists and others, from students to senior lecturers, and we identify ourselves through wearing lab coats in actions. And this group is about doing civil disobedience. So we are united in the belief that scientists must take non-violent direct action, because we have been writing papers for many years and telling to the politicians what they have to do, or doing outreach, and things have not changed. So we cannot act as if we are not in an emergency. We are saying we are in an emergency, so we have to act like it. So that's why we need to do non-violent direct action. Is the way to show we are an emergency and the most efficient way of addressing the climate crisis and to addressing the politician and try to do a systemic change that of the scale that we need in the time that we have, that is not much. And why scientists in particular? So we are very well connected internationally and well connected to people in power. And we have a lot of legitimacy. As a colleague said once, they cannot discard us as a bunch of hippies. So the public gives us legitimacy, and we legitimize the broader movement, the broader climate movement. And it's also like the example of the housing fire. If you have two people sitting on a house and one says to another, the roof is about to collapse, the house is on fire, and then that person continues reading the newspaper as if nothing would happen, how can we expect that the other person believes the warnings of the person who is saying everything is collapsing? So it's the same. If we are not acting as if we are in an emergency, we cannot expect the public to believe that we are in an emergency. And we have a strategy in which we want to normalize scientists doing civil disobedience as if they were always have been doing. Through a rapid cultural shift, we have started to doing so, especially since last April, when we did global actions around the world in more than 20 countries, more than 1,000 scientists. We also will get scientific institutions to explicitly endorse civil disobedience. There are institutions like Nature, and Nature is publishing papers saying that we are in an emergency and that the way of addressing the emergency is through civil disobedience, but then they themselves don't endorse civil disobedience, so it's a bit contradictory. And we want to do with scientists what Greta Thunberg did to the youth. We want to spark them to go to do civil disobedience and to do global demonstrations around the world and to spark the climate revolution. So before entering into what is nonviolence, I wanted you to ask all of you some questions. Nonviolence is a bit subjective in some cases, so I wanted to ask if you consider some scenarios violent or not. Imagine that you have a picket in front of a factory and you are preventing the workers to go into the factory. Now I'm going to try to launch a poll in which you can answer. 1 would be totally non-violent and 10 would be totally violent. So I'm going to launch this poll, and if someone can say if it's working. Can you see this poll? Yes. There are several questions. I don't know if people can go through the questions or just one. Teresa, maybe if you can tell me if the questions are being shown one by one after you answer.
For me, they're being shown all at once.
Okay, so I will give some time. So the first question is about a picket in a factory. There is another about a picket in front of an abortion clinic. Oops. One about using a hammer to destroy a military plane that is about to go to bomb civilians. One about entering an event and disrupting an event and taking the mic off a person who is doing the speech. It's a CEO of an evil company. Also to break glass in a fossil fuel company headquarters. So I will give a few minutes if people can say in the chat when they finish. Okay, some people have finished already. I think 12 people have already answered. Sorry about not working in the phone. I didn't check if it was working in the phone today. Sorry. Yes, so you answer all the questions and then you click submit. How many participants do we have? 19, okay. 13 people have answered. Yes, this is being recorded. Mario, sorry, you have to leave. Okay, I'll give 30 seconds more and we'll finish. Okay. Don't know why some yellow things are appearing in the screen. I don't know if it's just me. But okay, I will finish the poll now and we can see the results. Okay, so for the first question, picket in front of a factory, preventing the workers to enter. Does anyone want to talk? Anyone who has replied about being non-violent and saying why they think is non-violent? If you can raise your hand.
It's non-violent against people.
Okay. Yeah, we normally define violence like an action would be non-violent if we are not using physical or mental harm towards people, but is sometimes subject. Okay, so I see that mostly people think it's non-violent. Someone who thinks that this is violent could explain if they want. If not, we can go to the next question. What about picket in front of an abortion clinic? Anyone who has replied with that is non-violent wants to talk about it?
For me, it was the same, non-violent against the people, not physically violent against the people.
Okay. And someone who replied that is violent wanted to say why? So for example, for me, here I would put not a 10, but I would put more violent than the previous one because you're causing mental harm on people. I think, but I have my doubts because all of this is subjective. I also struggle with this, thinking it is non-violent, but it might have severe after effects. Yes. Okay, what about using a hammer to destroy a military plane about to go to bomb civilians? Someone who has put non-violent wanted to say why?
Yeah, for the same reason, non-physically violent against people.
Yes. In this case, I think if someone would consider violent about objects as well, in this case, for me, would be even more justified because the plane is going to cause more violence than the violence you are doing, although it's not towards people. Yeah. And what about number 4? Enter to an act in which the CEO of an evil company is being awarded and taking the microphone from the person. Anyone want to say?
I found that more violent in the physical sense, so I rated it higher. I think I gave it a 4.
Yeah, I think I agree, because in that case, you are physically taking a microphone from the person. For me, it wouldn't be as violent as a slap in the face, for example, but it's not, yeah, for me, I see it a bit more violent, yes. What about break glass of a fossil fuel company headquarters? Someone who sees this as violent want to say why? Greg, you want to say?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it as violence. I think as our other commenter said, it's not against people, so I wouldn't consider it to be violent. Check.
Okay, thank you. And someone who sees this violent want to say why? It's okay if not. So this was actually controversial.
Yeah.
Yes, you can go, Ben.
Yes. I guess in my country, they would see the destruction of property like that as very violent, actually. So they don't see the reason for it. They just see that you're destroying the property.
Okay, and which country is that?
This would be the Philippines.
Yeah, so the definition of non-violence is different also in each cultural context and in each country. So it's something that we have to take into account. So for example, in Spain, I got a lot of pushback from activists before I wanted to do this action. Some of my colleagues were very against it, but after it happened, they were not so against it, and many people saw it like, okay. And this is something that happens many times. So we would say that we define non-violence as we are not taking physical harm, or we're not producing physical harm or mental harm towards people, but it depends on each background, cultural context. So we use non-violence also as a tactic. It's about, it's like political jiu-jitsu. You are using your sacrifice as a way of showing that you really care about the topic that you are acting for, but also if you provoke the repression by the state as you are being non-violent, you will gain a lot of sympathy for the wider public. So it's a bit of using the strength of the opponent, which is the government or the governments of the, in each case, for your own gain. So showing your sacrifice and showing that you are non-violent, you are using that as a tactic. And it's actually a very effective tactic. It was used by Gandhi here when they were doing the Salt March in India in 1930, and afterwards with the whole campaign on independence of India. And we use direct action. So we cannot keep doing petitions or petitions online or legal demonstrations because it hasn't worked. And why do we do direct action? Why do we do all of this? Isn't the best way the negotiation? That is exactly the point. This is the goal of direct action, because nonviolent direct action seeks to create a crisis such that a community that has consistently refused to negotiate is forced to confront the problem. It seeks to dramatize the conflict so much that it can no longer be ignored. This is the words by Martin Luther King in his letter for the Birmingham prison, the whole campaign of the civil rights. It's also a very effective technique. So Maria Futa-Stefan and Erika Chenoweth really did a lot of research about campaigns, violent, non-violent, and using direct action or not in the history of the 20th century. And they find out that non-violent campaigns are twice as effective as violent campaigns. So it's not just a philosophy to be non-violent, but it's also a tactic. And they also found out that when you reach a percent of the population, which is around 3.5% of the population, every campaign is successful, always. But we don't actually need that many people to start a campaign. We have here an example that only 20 people or so, which were called the Freedom Riders, they went on a bus for the United States against the segregation laws, and they went to Alabama, which was the place with most racist and more repressive. And with only 20 people, they were very violently repressed. But with only 20 people, they started a campaign that ended the segregation in the United States, or at least the laws of segregation, because we know that there's still segregation, unfortunately. So imagine the power that we have, each one of us. Only 20 people in one country can lead to monumental changes. So that's why we are doing this. Okay, so now we are going to stop before getting into action designs to see if there are any questions about this part. You can put your hand up if you have any questions. If not, we will have questions at the end, but if you want to know more about direct action, non-violence, civil disobedience. Yes, Judy, do you want to go?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm Yudi from XR Indonesia. My question is, democracy in global south is not like democracy in global north. And when we take action and our civil disobedience, it's very difficult. Sometimes we get the repressive pull from the police. And yeah, my question is, how we can take direct action or civil disobedience in our country?
So that is a very difficult question, because yeah, you are right. The oppression is not the same in every country, and here in the global north we just risk arrest, but in many countries of the global south you risk much more. So I know that the history of civil disobedience and direct action has worked in many different contexts, but at the risk of losing lives. So I don't know what some people are trying to do, like, for example, the Network of Death for Climate. They are people from the global south, specifically from Argentina, the founders from Argentina that have to flee to Germany. And then they do actions which are coordinated in many countries. So, for example, if we do in the global north, we do actions against, like, targeting fossil fuel companies which are doing extractivism in global south countries, and we have the privilege of having a much better situation with the police, with the repression, so we have to go further and push more. And then in global south, that you have the choice of pushing as hard as you can and risking as much as you can, but of course knowing all the legal situations and being careful, much more careful than in the global north. So yeah, that's my opinion, that we have to do coordinated actions, and in the global north we have to push further for that. But anyone else have a different answer or want to say something else about the situation in their countries? If not, we can go back later. So I forgot to say a bit about the difference between pacifism and nonviolence. So pacifism is not looking for creating disruption or generating tension, but nonviolence is. And it's a tactic and looks to dramatize the conflict, as Martin Luther King said. There is also a difference between civil disobedience and normal demonstration, which is normal demonstration as normally legal because the government gives you permission to the demonstration, so they are prepared and you are not disrupting them, so that you are not bothering the government. Whereas if you are doing disruption, they have to give you something to stop the disruption, and you can win some demands that way, much easier than with demonstrations. Okay. So let's go now to how do we do action designs. So this is also based on my experience and the experience of some more people in Europe. And so maybe things in other countries are different and you can tell me about it later. So we could have some different type of actions depending on the people we have and what's our aims. For example, we can have massive open actions as, for example, the first or the second rebellion in the UK by Extinction Rebellion. They were 10,000 people blocking the whole of London. So they did an open call and everyone came, and the police knew, but they couldn't do anything because they were overwhelmed with people. We can have massive closed actions in which you have many people, but you don't have enough to overwhelm the police. The police are higher numbers than you. So you keep secret the sensitive details of the action, like the location, the date, the time, and only a handful of people know these details. but you can convoke people to other locations which are closer, and then you can form like groups of people, affinity groups, and they all have a shepherd, that we call them. In Spain, it's very typical to do this. So we have, I don't know, 5 groups of 5 people each group, and only one person of these groups know the location. So they meet around that location, and they all go there without knowing where they are going. And then the police cannot stop us because they don't know where the action is going to be. This is work very well, except if there is a leak that has happened sometimes, and then the police could be prepared. And you could have a very, very sensitive action, for example, sabotage or blocking the entrance of a ministry, and which is disruptive, but it's very sensitive. So you don't want anything to be leaked. So only a few people do the action. Also, if you don't have many people, you only have a few people doing highly disrupting action. And your action design is going to depend of how many people you have or what is your aim, because you can aim for a big action and then work to get the people you need for that. So in scientist rebellion, we have something which is called the right to act, or no blocking of actions, which means that if a group of people or one person wants to work on an action which is non-violent, we cannot stop them. And they can do it in the name of scientist rebellion if they are part of the group. They accept our principles and demands, and then they can act. For example, the people who were trying to stop me to break glass in Spain, they couldn't do because we have the right to act, and I could go and try to break the glass because it's difficult to break a glass. I've tried 3 times and I haven't succeeded yet. Okay. So what things you have to do before an action? So you have to have objective, your aim. What do you want? What is your demand? Is to the government, is to a fossil fuel company, is to raise awareness, or is to stop something, stop a fabric, industry, a factory? What is the narrative of the action? For example, if you're targeting Repsol, which is a fossil fuel company in Spain, you have to do some research, because all of this, the narrative, like Repsol is doing shit in Peru, and they are polluting these many countries, and all of these emissions, all of that can go in the press release and can go into social media or people doing interviews. All of this is very, very useful. So you have to have your narrative before the action. Better if it's like a month before the action, more or less. So you have to have also a script of what is going to happen during the action. At this time, we meet in this place, and then we go here, and then the press arrives, and all of that. It's very appropriate. It's very useful to do a scouting before actions. So you go and see the place, the location of the action. You see also at the time that you want to do. For example, Monday morning, there could be security guards there, so you have to know. Maybe on a Sunday there are not. So if you can go at the same time at the day of the week that you want to do the action, then it's better. You have to set the date, the time, and the location. And if it's open, you can share that, but many times it's not open. So be careful for also communication using Signal or using secure apps that don't allow the police to see what you're planning. It's also very useful to have plan A, B, and C. Normally, this is with different locations. For example, if you go to a ministry and you find that there is a lot of police that day because either they have found out because something has been leaked, or either there is an event happening there and you didn't know, it's good to have a plan B, another ministry that you could do the same action a bit later, but you can do something. You have to prepare the materials, if you have banners, if you have chains or whatever you need to use. And affinity groups are very useful because they self-organize, and it's much more difficult to coordinate among 5 people, and then these 5 people coordinate the other people in their affinity groups than coordinating 100 people all together. It's also very useful to do trainings. The legal training should be mandatory before an action, because everyone doing the action should know what they are risking. So they can do the action freely, knowing what they are doing. And also for each roles, there could be a different training. For example, in one action that I participated, we were going to block Repsol fossil fuel company laboratory, and then there was a parapet of people who had to stop the security guards, just creating a human barrier while other people were building some stuff. So for these parapet people, they had to train how to put together, if they are pushed, how to respond non-violently, and all of that. And the people building the structure need a different training to how to build that structure, for example. Also, non-violent direct action. Everyone should know how the actions are and how to de-escalate with the police, or how to de-escalate in case that is needed, because the action should remain non-violent at all times. Also, knowing the specific legal stuff of each country. For example, the action that I've been, you cannot take drugs to the action because the police then have an extra reason to take you, or you cannot bring knives, things like that. So the roles of the actions I've been are, for example, the high risk, medium risk actives, the people who are chaining to something, or blocking something, or just doing outreach. That could be a role. Then you have the coordinators of the action. For example, we have something called green light, and green light means that there is one person very like few hours before the action starts to be checking what's going on, and then when they see that everything is clear and there is no police or not much police, and then they say now, and the action starts. Police mediation, it is much better to have 1 or 2 people only dedicated to mediate with the police, because they have to be really, really comfortable with the legal situation or the legal background, and also the people who have been changed, they will be, they might be in a lot of stress, under a lot of stress, so they are not the best people to deal with the police, so others can do in their behalf. Care, we should have people taking care of the people. For example, if I'm chained for a long time, I will need water or some food, or just to take my jumper and they give me back later. Very important to have media, video, photo. If not, it's like the action didn't happen if you don't record it or take pictures for social media. And if you have journalists, much better. Never tell the journalists where the action is in advance, because they can tell the police unless it's an open action. And then what we do is to have an affinity group of journalists. So you meet the journalist 10 minutes before the action, like 5 minutes in a place which is 5 minutes from the location, and then you go with them to the location. What we did in one action recently was to have a van of journalists. This was really cool. So we were starting the action, and a van came, and all the journalists came out of the van and started taking pictures and recording, and it was very like a movie. Logistic people, if you need to build a structure, people need to come in to bring the structures and all of that. And in some cases, when you have a high-risk action, to have lawyers prepared to assist you in case you are arrested and you are taken to a police station. So I'm going to play now a video, and I hope it's going to be the sound is going to be okay. If it's not okay, someone let me know and I will stop sharing and share again, because I don't know if I shared it properly for the sound. So this one was an action that happened the 6th of April in Spain.
Yeah, there's no sound.
The sound is not working?
It's not.
Okay, I will stop sharing and then share again. And see if I can share in a better way. So my laptop is no, sorry, this was advanced sharing. Now share sound. Now it should work if I go again. Here.
Hay una activista y física que se llama Vandana Shiva que dice que no desobedeces a una ley, sino que estás obedeciendo a una ley superior. Esta es una acción no violenta llevada a cabo por la comunidad científica y académica. Nos rebelamos contra la inacción de los gobiernos. Nos rebelamos.
Sorry, I forgot it was in Spanish and I need to add the subtitles. Well,
los científicos tenemos que salir del laboratorio a explicarle a la gente lo que está pasando. No es el futuro, es el presente lo que está en juego. El presente de todos nosotros, la salud psíquica, física, los fallos en las cosechas, las migraciones, el desbordamiento marino. ¿Qué más necesitamos saber?
Hay propuestas de sobra para hacerlo. La cuestión es que haya voluntad política de entender y asumir el problema cuál es. Estamos dejando que este planeta se vaya a la mierda. Nuestros representantes no están actuando. Nuestros representantes nos están fallando. Este es un acto de desobediencia civil porque necesitamos transmitir la gravedad de la situación.
¿Qué tiene que contar la prensa que no se haya contado ya? ¿Cómo tiene que hablar la ciencia para explicar que el presente está aquí, que no son cálculos, que no son modelos, que es la realidad? Los políticos tienen que tomar sus medidas, los ciudadanos también. Tenemos que unirnos en esto.
Okay, so this was action in Spain. We had like 60 people or so, and we were dividing ourselves in affinity groups, and only a handful of people knew the location, and just the others, they were just told that they had to throw some liquid, which was biodegradable water with red something. And then they were just told that. They did some training about the legal background and about actually throwing that, but they didn't know the location. Yet when they see it's a very famous place, and when they see it, they just went because they were trusting in each other and they were trusting the legal background that they have. So yeah, it was pretty cool action. Okay. So during the action, we need good communication. For example, in this case, there were two people like an hour before to see the police. or to see what was going on, and they had to be communicating with all the shepherds, which are the people in the affinity groups coordinating all of them. And we have to maintain non-violence, so the trainings are important for that. You have to react if the police is hurting you, you have to react non-violent. So in those trainings, we have some de-escalation mechanisms. For example, one of them is to sit down. So when we finish throwing that, we all sit down, and then the police sees you not as much as a threat as if you are running. If you are running, it's more dangerous, things like that. Also, de-escalation is very important when you are blocking a road and you have angry drivers that just want to go through. So you have a special team of people de-escalating, and they are talking with the drivers. And in that moment, they are not trying to convince them about climate crisis. They are just listening to them, listening empathically, asking, saying, I'm sorry, I understand you. I know you have to go to work, but we are just going to be here for a few more minutes, or we are going to be here for an hour, or there is a way alternative way you can go, or things like that. So it doesn't turn in violent. So yeah, affinity groups, important. And police mediation, as I mentioned before, it's much better to have a specific people who know about the legal situation and have dealt with the police before in order to deal with the police. So it's also important what happened after an action. So it's very useful to do a debriefing. So you can also go into affinity groups, and each affinity groups is talking about what went well of the action, what went wrong, and how can we improve for the next time. And then we put all in common afterwards. It's good to also, for example, the media team, there is a team which is just dealing with the journalists and social media. They normally cannot do the debriefing because they have to keep working. So after the action finishes, it's very important to send a press release as soon as possible, because if not, the journalists just publish what they want, and it's better that they publish your narrative and not what they think the action have been about. And you also have to be monitoring media, also taking notes of which journalists have published you for next time you will call them. There will be a lot of interviews, and you can also make a good video, as in this case. So in the moment you take recordings, but then if you can do a good video about their action, much better. There is another example of an action that happened also in April in Panama. In this case, they were going to several embassies, and this video is especially beautiful. I really like it. So it's important to do good videos.
Se trata de nuestra supervivencia.
En la embajada de Estados Unidos también hay gente.
Necesitamos la acción de los gobiernos ya. Esta es nuestra última oportunidad.
Es un llamado a atención que la Madre del Tierra nos está dando.
Este es el tema más importante.
Yeah, in this case, I think they had a cinema, a person working in cinema, so they did a really good video. Sorry. I'm sorry, it was in Spanish. I thought it had subtitles, but no. Okay, so shall we? Well, I will do this and then we'll stop for more questions. So legal risk. It's very difficult in this talk to talk about legal risk because they are widely different in many different countries or situations. I would say it's really fundamental to know beforehand, so you know what you are risking. Talk to lawyers before, and especially lawyers who work with activists. And it depends a lot on the country, also on the person background. For example, if doing actions in Spain, I have a lot of privilege because I have a residency here, because I'm white, but we know that systemic racism makes that the situation of people of color is more dangerous, and also the situation of people which are not residents of the country. So it depends a lot. I can say a bit about Europe, and then a bit about Abya Yala and Africa that others, like our colleagues, have told me. In Europe, I've done action in Spain, in the UK, and in France, and I've been arrested 2 times in the UK, once in France and once in Spain. In the UK, it was quite chill, and we were treated very well. It was also during COP. So during COP, normally the police is better because they have the international pressure on them. Although there were many more COPs than normally, so it was more difficult to do an action, but once you did an action, you were just arrested, and we didn't have any criminal charges. So it was like if we did nothing. And then in France, I was arrested just for half an hour, and it was in a fossil fuel company, and they didn't want to press charges because they know that they will get bad publicity if they press charges, at least in Europe or in some countries in Europe. So they normally don't do. And then in Spain, for that action in the Congress, only 15 people were arrested, but months after the action happened. And we have been charged with 2, well, we are being prosecuted for 2 crimes. None of those crimes we did, because they said we did criminal damage, which is not true, because that was the thing that we throw was erased very easily. And then they say that we interrupted the session of the politicians that were inside, which is not true either. So I don't think that we are going to be convicted. But it also depends on the political situation, and we still don't know much about that. But then if you go to some countries in Abya Yala in Latin America, the situation is much more complicated. So we have a colleague that had to flee from Argentina because he was being threatened by the government, and had a lot of difficulties there. In Colombia, it's the most dangerous country, or one of the most dangerous countries on the world for climate leaders. 200 have been killed in 2020 or something like that. It's very bad. And in Africa, I was asking before to our colleagues in Africa about that. I have to check, but they were saying that they are risking long jails, injuries, long time in hospitalizations, and even deaths related to shooting and beating by the security, by the army, assassinations, long jail, so things like that. So even in April, when they were organizing some conferences, they have to hire security for doing conferences. So it's really, really bad. Okay, so before continuing, do we have any questions about any of this? You can raise your hand. About legal, I'm not an expert. I just can say some things about my experience and about the experience of others, but not a lawyer. So it's very important to talk with lawyers before doing actions. Greg?
In the US, we have legal builds legal associations to advise. Can you comment on other countries and the sort of legal resources for advising people planning actions? Check.
Yeah, thank you so much. That we also have in many places. In Spain, there is an association of lawyers that you always contact, and they advise you and work for you normally for free. They are like an NGO, so it's quite good. And they are quite experienced with activists. Anastasia?
Yes, hi. I was wondering, I don't know if you're gonna talk about it later, but what are then the consequences of having charges pressed against you or having been arrested or things like that? So does it stop there or yeah?
It depends on each country, I think. In Spain, I think no one has been convicted for climate protests yet, but some people have been convicted for other types of protests, and I don't know exactly how it affects if you are going to ask for a job. Maybe they consider that it was a protest and not something bad. In the UK, many people have been, but I don't know exactly what happened there. Julia, do you know about that?
I don't think we have any concrete news yet, but if you watch this space, because something is happening over the next couple of months regarding the 9 scientists for XR activists who were arrested in April. So that was separate to us, but their trials are upcoming, so we'll see what happens.
But if they are convicted, do you know if they have issues on their daily life after the conviction?
I don't know. And things are changing in the UK as well, because a new law came in this year. So I can't say how things might even be from now on, to be honest.
But then this is only in case of conviction, right? Because if you get arrested but no charges, or even if you have charges but no conviction, it doesn't matter. It's not that there is a record of that, right?
There is a record of charges. If you are charged, you will have a record, but because you will have convicted, even if it's a fine, like even if you don't go to jail, you can have criminal background, but I don't know if that affects you much. For example, here in Spain, it's not a big problem if you are a national of Spain. There were some people who were very worried about they are going to do exams for working for the government, for working like as teachers or as administrative for not for the government, but the government is like paying that because it's like a social service, and they were worried that if they were convicted they couldn't access that, but the lawyers were like, no, bro, don't worry, this will be fine, you can do the action. So sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's not, and it depends on each country. Anyone has any experience with that in other countries? If you are in Colombia, but if you are doing action, they will know and they will go for you. Sometimes, so yeah, it very much depends on the country. But you can check all of these before an action, and you can check with the Association of Lawyers, and they will know because they have experience of other cases. Okay, so let's continue. We are about to finish. We just have a few more slides. Okay, so we also wanted to know about the impact in our academic careers, and I asked my colleagues And this is what they answered. On a mere personal emotional level, I feel better now when I do my job, which is in theoretical physics, because sometimes before I felt a bit useless to society, while now I feel I can help the environment and the society also outside of my job. In this late capitalism, people often feel their identity is based on their work, and to me, SR was important to give a new perspective on my life. Another person said that taking part in civil resistance is the only way I can still justify doing any science at all, and I would have quit and gone to do something directly and immediately useful otherwise. And I see no future for our societies or our science unless we fix the climate emergency, and civil resistance is the only way that still might get us there. So the impact of my career has been 100% positive. And I asked a very famous scientist in Spain after he did an action with us, if he had now more credibility or less credibility among his peers. And he said, after the action, there were several weeks of much attention in the media, lots of interviews to talk about it, and then things went back to normal, but the media called me a lot. And often the issue comes up even if they call me for something else. So they call him for talking about his research, but then they ask about civil disobedience. There were some scientific commentators and others who did not understand, and I have lost their assessment, but overall my credibility has increased among many people with social and environmental awareness, and many colleagues show support. But we have had some cases in the UK in which a PhD student has been threatened to be kicked out of the PhD program if they are convicted, if they are found guilty, which is a bit shocking, especially for me because I did a PhD in the UK and I was arrested during my PhD, and my supervisor just told me everyone should get arrested to get a PhD, get arrested in climate or another type of activism. So yeah, I got a lot of support from my university or from my supervisor. The university didn't say anything, but then there are other cases in which you can be risky. So okay, so which is our plan for this autumn? So we are building a coalition of climate movements to concentrate all the energy in one country, 1 month, and with one demand. So we are all going to be going to Germany and in Europe. This is a Europe-wide mobilization, but we will have parallel actions in many other countries. And why are we just going to one country? So this is because we are now going to the next level. We have been until now mobilizing in our own countries, and we haven't really got enough people to create the disruption that is needed to change things. So we have had some victories, but symbolic victories like declarations of emergencies, which haven't led to much. So we are planning to make the first legislative win in Europe to spark the revolution in Germany and to create a domino effect in other countries. And we want to do it in October, so very soon. So we are mobilizing for that. We are mobilizing in a continent level. And the demand is going to be very likely related with stopping fossil fuels industry or stopping fossil fuel financing, something like that. Yes. And we are in coalition already with Last Generation there, which is a group which was formed this year, in April this year, but they have grown exponentially since then, and they are hundreds now. So we will overwhelm the police and we will show our sacrifice, probably with some time in prison, short period of time in prison, to really show that we are willing to push harder, and because we need to. And we are talking right now with some groups like Dead for Climate or End Fossil, which are very likely to join us. So we will have parallel actions as well as the actions in Berlin, in other places, probably in Berlin, German embassies. And we will also have international actions later in November at COP. So this is the last slide. This QR is for a survey that you can fill if you want to support the Germany mobilization. You can do it from your own country if you don't want to come to Germany, but it's very good to have people supporting, and also if you want to come, you need to fill that survey. And this is everything I had. So now we can have some more questions.
I understand that there's no formal hierarchy, and in a way there must be a decision-making process. How to exclude that the whole movement is I don't know, instrumentalized. So where is the internal democracy? I see kind of this liquidity approach, but what is the guarantee from the bottom that the process remains controllable, under the control of that remains grassroots?
Are you talking about the horizontality of the group?
Yeah, like
if you want to say in Spanish, and I can then answer in English.
Me preocupa el ejemplo de Spiriman y de las movilizaciones de la sanidad andaluza. Podría instrumentalizar contra un determinado gobierno si no hay una estructura democrática explícita. O estáis diciendo grupos de afinidad, pastores. Me parece bastante vulnerable a un dirigismo desde arriba, ¿no?
Vale. Yeah, so the question was about how are we organizing, so it's not instrumentalized by the state, or there is not one figure which is controlled by the state and running everything. So I've just explained the structure in actions, but this is not how we are structured internationally. So we are an horizontal movement, and we don't have leaders, we don't have bosses. So I've been designing actions, but others have done the same. And I can propose an action, and people can join if they like it or not. If I'm proposing something which is very crazy, people won't probably support it. So as we don't have leaders, it's very difficult that our leaders get very comfortable with speaking to politicians and stop being radical or want. Yeah, so it's that. I don't know if that was a good answer. Maybe Julia or Teresa want to say something else about our structure?
I think you have covered it. Also, a lot of the members are working academics, so you can find us. It's not a, you know, our names are known to some people. But I think that that's the main thing, is that because we don't have a single point of kind of governance or anyone like that, that then it cannot happen that the whole movement is co-opted by any group. Oh, Greg has his hand up.
Okay, any more questions?
Greg has a hand up.
I was just going to add to that. I should know the answer to this question, and I don't because I'm part of SR, but I think scientists are going to follow sociocratic governance principles, and that sort of keeps decision-making decentralized. Is that correct?
Julia, do you want to answer that?
Well, actually, we're always working on the structure, but yeah, decentralized is a good keyword. So decision-making is decentralized, and anything that happens is decided upon by the local chapters and local parts of the organization, or maybe working groups, like we have a group of life scientists who are working on a project, for example. So yeah, decentralized, and no one group of leaders who could be co-opted.
For example, for April, we had common strategy and common dates. So we said, okay, on this date, we are going to go all at the same time, but we left the decisions to each country of the action plans and the action designs. So they were completely free in what they wanted to do according to their context. They organized themselves. So sometimes it's useful to act all at the same time so it's has more impact and we reinforce each other. But that was it. That was the decision, and the decision wasn't done by one person. So it was done in the meetings. We have weekly meetings, and we were talking about which dates could be best. Then for deciding the demand, we had a specific group, and we have all the people interested in making that decision were there, and we were having meetings. And in the end, we had vote on which demand we wanted. So yeah, we are still improving our structure, and there is a specific group, which is the group called structure, to try to improve this structure, but we want to keep it as horizontal as possible, like go away from top hierarchies, top and bottom hierarchies.